Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Franklin from the Miami University of Alumni Association, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this session of Winter College 2021. For more than 17 years, Winter College has been the Alumni Association's premier alumni education event. We are so excited to be able to bring it to a broader audience in this virtual format this year. We've had an amazing lineup over the last 2 days, and you can navigate the full schedule by clicking Events by Type on this website's top toolbar and selecting Winter College 2021. Feel free to join programs even as they are in progress, and if you can't make it to all of them, sessions will be recorded and will be posted online. Our session today is College Sports in the Pandemic, Miami Coaches in Conversation. It will be moderated by Dr. Stephen Dailey, Associate Athletic Director of Human Performance and Wellness, featuring 3 of our Miami Athletics head coaches due to discuss college sports in the pandemic. These coaches are Miami Ice Hockey head coach Chris Bergeron, Miami Swimming and Diving head coach Hollie Bonewit-Cron, and Miami football head coach Chuck Martin. In this conversation, the panel will discuss how Miami Athletics, the Mid-American Conference, and the National Collegiate Hockey Conference have addressed the pandemic from testing and training to competition and games. We have the opportunity to hear about this topic from our featured head coaches, all with unique experiences over the last year in the pandemic. So if you could join me and let's get started. Remember, during the session, you can submit questions or comments by clicking the Asked question below the video.
So, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming on. We've had a very interesting year over the last 12 months, and just to give a little bit of history of where we actually started. In January, the end of January, Miami was probably potentially the epicenter to start with. We actually had a scare at the end of January. We had an international student from Wuhan that we were worried that had the coronavirus. We actually had games canceled. There was a men's basketball game. There was a a swim meet that was canceled. And on Super Bowl Sunday at 7:15, President Crawford, Governor DeWine, and Dr. Amy Acton, who's the health director of Ohio, actually said we were free and clear. And then in March, everything else happened. March 8th was the March 12th, I'm sorry, was when everything got shut down from an NCAA standpoint. We played our last baseball game. We actually won against Penn State 5-1. Coach Bergeron was in Duluth, Michigan, and Minnesota, and had to come on back. We were in the middle of spring football practices, and Coach Bonewit-Cron were getting ready for the MAC tournament. So during the summertime, we in the spring, we had a lot of discussions about how we were going to work things out during the summer, getting kids in, getting kids facilities, testing people, and then on August 8th, the Mid-American Conference at that time decided we weren't going to play fall sports, including football. And I will be completely honest with you. I took a big breath of a sigh of relief because I knew it was going to be difficult. And then, Chuck, I can't remember, but I think it was August 25th or 24th, we decided we were going to go with it. And since that time, it's still been a little bit of a blur. The student athletes, the coaches have been very, very good as far as rolling with the punches. Like I said, this has been a moving target with testing and contact tracing and quarantining, and everybody has done a very, very good job. The first thing I'd like to do, this kind of question is out to the group. During the pandemic, obviously, our kind of worlds have got turned upside down, and the main thing is with recruiting. So recruiting is so important in collegiate athletics, and if you guys could just explain how that's affected you from the recruiting standpoint, and also maybe if you can kind of talk to us a little bit about this dead period that we hear about with recruiting. Anybody?
I will go first. When we got hit last year, we were a little fortunate compared to maybe some other sports because all our recruiting calendars are different. We had already had a couple hundred juniors on our campus. So we had gotten through probably 60 to 75% of what we do in recruiting for that particular class. So what we did from our standpoint is one thing, when the pandemic hit and you couldn't be around your kids, all you really could do is recruit and check on your kids. So what we did is we tried to do all the follow-up visits. We had multiple junior days where we had kids that had seen the campus. They had learned about the academics. They had learned about campus life. They had seen our facilities. They had a pretty good understanding of what Miami football was all about. And then typically after that, the kids we really want, we have back for individual visits. Well, we did all the individual visits that would have happened back in the football building. We just did them based on having Zoom meetings with kids and parents and coaches. So our calendar wasn't too bad. We got a lot of commits the first 2 months of the quarantine. We had a ton of commits. Partly all we were doing was recruiting, but it had timed up okay for us compared to other sports who hadn't been on the road yet and hadn't identified maybe the kids they were going after. So for last year's class, everything was pretty good. We're pretty optimistic about last year's class. Obviously, moving forward this year, typically we have summer camps where we have a bunch of juniors here, didn't have it, or juniors to be here and sophomores to be here. We didn't have the summer camps. Typically, we have a ton of game day visits in the fall, didn't have it. We go out December and January, didn't have it. So for this class is really where the pandemic's really hitting us in football, because we have not had any face-to-face interaction at all other than FaceTiming on a phone call with next year's class. It's not as bad as it seems because the NCAA granted everybody another year of eligibility. So a normal year where we were trying to sign 20 to 25 kids in football would be pretty disastrous right now because we're really kind of grasping at straws, versus our next year's class will be the smallest class probably in the history of college football, because every kid, not just the seniors, but every kid in our program was granted another year of eligibility. Therefore, we're probably going to be more in the 10 scholarship range. So although we're missing all this recruiting on the road during this dead period, because our class is going to be so small, I don't know that it will hurt us as bad as it would have in another year. That's how it affected football.
Hollie, how's it affected with what you're doing from a recruiting standpoint with swimming and diving?
So our recruiting cycle more or less runs year round, but we do have significant time periods in which we are signing our athletes, and the fall is a big period for that. So when we got into this dead period in the spring, summer timeframe last year, it really put a little bit of a damper in how we did things. We did have recruiting visits set up for the spring. Those had to be canceled. We then decided to think a little bit outside the box, where we had junior days, so to speak, virtually. So we took a smaller subgroup of our athletes. So we would take men and women from, the spring group, the middle distance group, the distance group, and be on a panel so that our recruits were able to jump on this virtual call and ask questions, and they could get honest, real answers. The coaches were not on these calls to keep everything very authentic from a student athlete, a current student athlete point of view. So I do think that the dead period has inhibited some things that we do, but it's also allowed us to branch out and think of new ways that we can reach out to our recruitable student athletes. So moving forward, when the dead period eventually does get lifted, I think we will still continue to engage some of these practices that we have been doing. So I think it's been a win-win in some ways. It has been nice that all sports are in a dead period versus maybe just one here or one there. We are all under this blanket dead period. So it really feels as though we've been able to pump the brakes, rethink about how we do some things, and move forward with somewhat of a newer structure.
Sounds good. Coach Burge, how's it? Probably a lot of the kids that you look at too from the north is basically they've been shut down a little bit as far as their sports goes and everything. How's it affected you guys?
Well, ours is pretty much year long, like Hollie's is. We don't have a recruiting calendar. I don't know how many sports don't, but we're one of them that don't. The other the other angle for ice hockey at Miami right now is this coaching staff's been here under 2 years. So we were handed a list of kids that were verbally committed to Miami. And typically that list goes away because the coaching staff change means they're not going to come anymore. But what we've tried to do is be fair to each one of those processes and each one of those kids and families and so on. That has hurt us in trying to follow up with them. Part of that follow-up is we wanted to get them here on campus so we can find out why Miami, when they picked Miami in the first place. So we've gone to, Zoom meetings and so on in terms of trying to get face-to-face with people. We've gone to strictly video when it comes to evaluating talent and so on, whether that be kids that were committed or new kids. It's something that it's. I don't want to say the new world because that's what everybody's saying, but we're a group that wants to get into the rink. We want to see people face to face. We want to see body language. We want to get parents and kids on our campus, and it's put it on hold a little bit. Next year's class is going to be a work in progress, probably until the dead period is lifted, at least to the point to get some kids on campus. We can get face to face with them. Where I hear what Chuck is saying 100% in terms of guys getting another year of eligibility, but with this transition, just the real talk about around here is I'm not sure how many guys we have room for moving forward in terms of returning. So that's a whole other piece for us. We think next year's class, let's say it's typically 6. Well, it could be 8 or 9 because that's how many kids. Because we're still in transition mode. So. It's a strange time for sure. It's affected us, but like everybody else, we'll find a way.
The kind of next question, obviously under the best of times, trying to keep student athletes motivated with practices and classes and everything else. What have you guys been trying to do to in these kind of unprecedented times, keeping the kids motivated? Hollie?
Well, I think it takes a lot of communication. We've definitely wanted to communicate with our athletes on multiple different levels. And the best way we could do that is through virtual calls, at least in the interim before we could have them back on deck. So I think to keep them really engaged, we discussed with them what they've been able to do outside of being in a swimming pool. Again, before we were able to get back into the pool, there was a lot of creativity, especially since we're not land people. So we have to get really creative, and we rely on swimming pools, and the vast majority of swimming pools were shut down, even up until recently. Fortunately, our facility opened up this past fall. So we were able to get our athletes in, we were able to keep them engaged, get them reacclimated back into our training. And again, it's about the communication. So it's not even so much the physical side of what we're trying to do, but it's so much the mental and psychological side of really taking care of these student athletes.
Chuck, what have you guys been doing just from a motivational standpoint? I know that, we were all ready to play a couple games and we had games that we didn't get to play. And how do you keep our guys motivated?
Yeah, this to me has been really, really difficult on the student athletes, at least for football. I can't speak for other sports, but, getting sent home last spring, okay, no one had ever dealt with anything like that, obviously. And then obviously we weren't allowed to come back normally with the summer. And then we got to come back in the summertime. But it was obviously a much different schedule with a lot of protocols set in place to follow. So it wasn't, they weren't in their comfort zone. And then for us with the uncertainty, all of a sudden, we hear on a Saturday morning, we're not playing football. There wasn't really any lead up to that the word was that we were going to play, and other conferences had already said they were going to play. And then all of a sudden our league decides we're not playing, which, and they do it on a Saturday, which, again, we're not really around our guys on the weekends. We were scrambling. And then you deal with, now we're coming back to play. And then you're dealing, with all the social stuff that went on throughout the summer. Again, I can't speak for other sports how it's affected, but my locker room's 50% African-American. This campus is 3% African-American. There's always stuff in my locker room that I deal with on a daily basis as far as adjusting and feeling comfortable and feeling welcome and feeling wanted, that any minority that goes to Miami has to deal with on a daily basis. Then everything they're seeing around the country. Then we play and we're only having 6 games. And then, the tough thing is we play 2 weeks. The next week we have no warning. And on a Thursday, it wasn't a Thursday because it was a midweek game, but 2 days before the game, we get a call the game's canceled. With, again, no warning for these kids. It's one thing if they knew they weren't going to play, but they practice all week, they're ready to play OU, their big rival, and all of a sudden we get a call, game canceled. The very next week, it's 3 days out where we're planning on playing Kent State. It's a big game, and all of a sudden the game's canceled. And then the last week was us. It finally hit our team in the last week, and we couldn't play. So it was really difficult. Then we had to send our kids home over Christmas for 6 weeks, and anyone who's coached doesn't want your kids away from you for 6 minutes, let alone 6 weeks. Typically, we're either in a bowl game or we're back for J-term, but we weren't back for J-term. So when we got our kids back in January, their heads were everywhere, but being excited about being at Miami, being excited about being a college student athlete, it was a very difficult time. So that's what people – yes, we're trying to play games and all the articles, and yes, we're trying to get an experience, but just the day-to-day, what's on these kids' heads and what's on their hearts. We always have issues with where you say depression or people, but we've more so than ever because these kids have had a crazy 10 months. The good news from us in football this offseason, Hollie and Berge are either finishing up or in the middle of their season. Like this offseason has felt way normal for these kids. It's we're not testing 4 times a week because we're out of season, and the offseason condition lifting has kind of felt almost just like previous years. So this last 5 weeks have really kind of got our kids back in a good place for the most part. And hopefully we're on the back end of this moving forward for the fall season. But it's been really hard on these kids. And that's my biggest frustration through all of this. And whether it be the COVID or any of the other issues that we've had to deal with, is a lot of people in positions of power and decision-making have totally forgot about the human element in this. We forget that there's actually a Miami student athlete that's getting COVID, and his or her life is being disrupted, and how we react to it as a society or as a university. There was a lot of blaming going on all the time, not just with Miami, but just the whole world. It's like these kids felt like if they got COVID, they had done something wrong, where we know millions and millions of people have gotten COVID. But if a student athlete got it, then it was, they're not making the sacrifice necessary to play. They're making poor decisions, which I don't think any of the college student athletes anywhere at Miami didn't want to play and didn't want to try to make all the sacrifices to try to play. I know when OU got canceled, it was like, well, OU's not taking it serious. It's like, no, they're taking it serious. It just they're one of the 30 million Americans that got hit by COVID. Surprise, surprise. So it's been a really trying year, but our kids are doing really good right now. But to be honest, the fall sucked. It wasn't fun at all, and our kids were miserable, and made us as coaches miserable when you see your kids hurt like that.
Berge, how have you've worked on trying to keep the guys motivated? I mean, obviously the bubble was a way different thing. They were gone away from everybody. You guys were kind of isolated out in Omaha. I guess there's worse places to be isolated, but Omaha is Omaha. So
my story is probably similar to Hollie and Chuck's. Our fall sucked. August and September and parts of October for our program is when it kind of went like wildfire, and we seemed to be on quarantine. The better numbers of us. When I say us, I'm probably talking about a group of 35 people with 28 players and then staff. By the time we got to the middle of October and beginning of November, and we had the pod to look forward to, which was December the 2nd, December the 1st, something like that. The motivation piece was easy because then it became somewhat normal. Yes, we had to wear masks. Yes, we had to try to stay away from one another in terms of in the locker room and so on and so forth. But it started to get normal. Then once we got through the pod, they were home for 6 or 7 days, and they were back. And then the second half of the year, with the exception of one weekend, which those games got postponed and they've already been made up. We've had a fairly normal season since December 2nd. Again, I know the word new normal is overused, and I'll do the same, but we got used to the new normal. The new normal was testing 3 times a week and so on and so forth. So the motivation part was easy because we just got into a groove and we were playing, and that was the motivation. We're playing. We're in season. You get to play games. There's other teams in college hockey not playing at all. There's other students around college athletics generally not at all playing, participating, whatever. So it was a little less difficult to keep them motivated once we got, like I say, middle of October, beginning of November, and up until that point, basically from August 1st, we were the motivation piece was out the window because we were quarantining. It seemed like every other day. These guys were getting 10 days. This guy was getting 14, and that included all the staff as well. So, you know, I think our motivation hasn't been as difficult as some other people because our season has you know, knock on wood, gone fairly normal. And now the motivation part, Doc, is we got to play better, which has nothing to do with COVID.
And this is another question, and Chuck, you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but you know, most of our teams with Hollie and Chuck, and for that matter, Chris too, we have relatively large roster sizes. We got these kids having another year of eligibility come back. You got kids coming in. How's that extra year that we have to deal with? How's that going to kind of play into decisions in the future coming up in 21, 22? Hollie.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know if that was directed towards me. So
I directed to everybody and I forgot to say who
we are.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll jump right in there. So
Yep.
yeah, we do have a large roster, and we are starting with our seniors, and then we're moving backwards, juniors, sophomores, freshmen, and speaking with those athletes individually about what their trajectory is going to look like. We definitely have a couple that we've offered an extra year to. And then we have many other athletes specifically in this senior class and even some in the junior class that have already found their jobs, have already found their medical schools and their graduate schools. So you're talking about, you know, a larger group of athletes, but I think the vast majority of them, they're kind of one camp or the other. They're either going to stay the extra year, they're going to tell me, and they're going to, you know, want to prepare for it, and we're going to work together with that. That may or may not have scholarship implications or not. You know, we have to see what that looks like. And then we have another group of athletes that are saying, I'll be ready to move on after my senior year. I know exactly what I want to do, and I want to take that route. So I don't see a lot of gray area. But again, it goes back to the communication that we need to have with our athletes very often.
Chris, how's this affecting you guys?
Well, it'll probably depend on the kid, Doc. We sat down with every kid, every junior and senior. We've talked to the sophomores and freshmen about it, but they're so far away, it really doesn't matter. The other intangible that hockey has that some other sports don't is we've got a minor pro system. We've got a AA and a AAA, and they all want to play minor pro, or at least most of them want to play some type of pro where they end up playing, you know, a minor pro or whatever. So they go on from college and go to that. Our senior class, we've talked to all of them. There's some kids that want to come back that we don't have room for, just the reality of where our program is. Some of the juniors in the same conversation. So how is it affecting? It's added a layer and a level of conversation. That's all it's done, and that's totally fine. It's a healthy conversation. We agree, like what Hollie said. Basically, some of the conversations would maybe a kid who's on scholarship. We wouldn't have a scholarship for him, but we would have a spot on the team for him. Again, I think it just depends on the kid. It hasn't made it crazy. It hasn't. Unfortunately, there's some hard conversations. There's some kids that want to come back that we don't have money or opportunity for, and that's, again, I continue to say this, and I'm sorry, but we're a program in transition, and we need change, and that's part of it. So we'll address it on an individual basis, and we'll go from there.
Chuck, how's it affecting us with you guys with football?
Yeah, I mean, one, I'm not gonna. I can echo what Berge and Hollie said. That's everything. It's a case by case basis. It's a lot of conversation, a lot of communication, all that. And then what I'll just add is just obviously we have more bodies, so it affects more people, and even long term the planning. So like here's an example: David Redding was going to graduate with a degree in engineering, and he was kind of planning on moving on. He had 1 year of eligibility left. He's been a part-time starter, a really solid backup, a kid we wouldn't really want to move on. We'd like him to stay. Great kid, contributor, to our team. Started multiple times in our MAC championship season. But just where he was at in his life and what he was going to do was making sense. He only had 1 year. He's going to get a job and really try to find a company that would pay for his master's because that's what he wants. Well, here's a great example how it works in our benefit. Here's a kid we probably wanted back. Now he's got 2 years left, potentially. And then that changed the whole conversation from which we had last fall before the NCAA ruled on this, that he probably wasn't going to come back. He was moving on. We were moving on. He had a great career. It was awesome. Well, now he's got 2 years left, and we could keep him on scholarship and he could get his master's. He just got accepted last week in the master's program in engineering at Miami. All right. So here's a kid that probably wanted to be back, but didn't really make sense with only 1 year left. And we want him back, and it worked out good. Like Berge and Hive said, there's all sorts of other individual conversations of, maybe some other kids that we would like back that aren't coming back because, like Hollie said, they have a job already and they're moving on to the next stage of their life, which is fine. Or like Berge was saying, hey, there's some kids that maybe would like to come back for another year, but we only have so many scholarships and we're planning on them moving on. So it's really time they're going to probably have to move on. They have their Miami degree. They've had a good career here, and we're gonna go with one of a freshman or recruited kid next year. So it's a little more cumbersome for me. They have big rosters. My roster's enormous. So, and then even planning the future, because you have some kids that now are already talking about, I've got this extra year. I'm a sophomore. If I do this right, I might be able to get my master's before my eligibility is up, which is awesome. There's some kids that, maybe struggle a little bit academically. We know we can slow down their pace. We don't have to rush. Like, we know they're probably going to be here another year. They don't have to take 15 every semester. And that's a benefit to that kid because now he can have a more manageable load because Miami is really challenging. And he is struggling just to keep his head above water. So it's every kid's different. There is no way, but it's a lot of conversations, a lot of communication, and like everything else in college athletics, it's very fluid, and we're used to fluid, and we're pretty good at fluid.
Yeah, what I've said many times, like I said, if you can't think out of the box this year, you're have a lot of trouble. So, first we'll go. Just you brought up a little bit on the bubble, and I kind of thought a little bit more normal. Can you elaborate a little bit on what it was like in the bubble and their testing protocol and how that affected you guys in the practice and everything?
Well, the bubble basically was 21 days. There was 10 games over the course of those 21 days. We arrived on a Sunday. The whole team got tested, a PCR test when we arrived. I woke up Monday morning to a whole list of positives, and we were scrambling and panicking and so on and so forth. And ultimately, I think why our league chose Omaha and the University of Nebraska Health Center was because of exactly what happened to our group and a couple of other groups in our league, in that with all our positive tests, they basically found out why we tested positive. And a lot of it was because there was antibodies already in place. So we got through the first 48 hours. We basically, where it wasn't normal for us was the amount of practice. We typically practice 3 or 4 days a week leading into 2 games on the weekend. Well, this was, one practice maybe in between these games. The first week it was 3 games. The second week was 3 games. The third week was 4 games. And it was quite a time. We actually had one boy actually test positive for an active case of COVID-19 who was quarantined for 10 days in the hotel, which was unfortunate. The poor kid he's a transfer, and he had waited his year in residency to play. And the day that he was able to play, he tested positive. So other than him, we had everyone available to us for the whole 21 days. We had basically there was 3 tests a week or so, which again has become normal. And you know, a lot of the boys did a lot of door dashing and Uber Eats or whatever they do. You had to get a little creative for that, because it wasn't a you know, a bubble like the NBA or the NHL had done, where we couldn't leave. We actually walked back and forth to and from the hotel and the rink, and between the rink and the hotel were some restaurants. So the rules were, you can't eat in the restaurant. You can order your food, whether it be online or in person, and then take it out. Obviously, masks required and all that kind of stuff. But that was 21 days of our lives. Our guys were great. I was extremely proud of how they handled themselves. You know, one day we had a couple of guys eating in a hotel or eating in a restaurant that we were told, okay, don't do that. So I mean, there was very few bumps. And it was a very unique experience for these guys. And again, I thought they handled themselves great, but typically we don't play 10 games in 21 days. You know, typically you're practicing again 3 or 4 times the amount of games you're playing, but that wasn't the case. And we played in front of no fans. You know, we competitively was whatever. That was a whole other conversation, but I thought all in all the pod worked, and the NCHC was the one league that did it, not only in our sport, but I think in a bunch of other sports, and it was a success. So we're going to try again to do it for the playoffs. It'll be on a much smaller scale. Obviously, you have to earn games to stay there, but it'll be a pod / bubble in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and we'll see how that goes.
Now, excuse me. I think just the science behind what they did in Omaha with the University of Nebraska Medical Center would be nice if everybody across the country were able to apply that same science. Unfortunately, we have I don't even know how many health departments that we have, but all of them are independent. So it was a breath of fresh air when Drew would call back and say, "Hey, these guys know what they're doing," and they kind of walked us through it. It's like, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So that was good. The kind of talking about, like I said, you know, Coach Bergeron, I mean, you played back in the old days in Goggin when there was only about 2,000 people in there, but it was always kind of rocking. You coaching here when this place with the new Goggin was always kind of rocking. What's it like in our previous conversation aside? What's it like? Kind of playing in a relatively empty Goggin ice rink.
Well, again, I'll go back to the pod. We played 10 games in an empty ice rink in Omaha, and typically they have a really good fan base, and it's a ruckus place and loud and so on. So we got used to it. Is my point. Then we went to Western Michigan. Was our first trip of the second half, and there was no fans there. You know, I think they've gotten used to it, Doc. Would we rather play in front of fans and a good student section and all that kind of stuff? Absolutely. But they've gotten used to it. And I do think one of the things we've tried to do, and I know as an athletic department we've tried to do it from team to team, is be grateful for this year. It was a league thing. You know, let's not worry about that we don't have fans. Let's just be grateful for the fact that we're competing and playing games when the alternative would some other people aren't playing. So I think the guys miss the fans. There's no doubt about that. But it is something we got used to in the pod, and the second half's been that. I think we've played, you know, we've played 5 games at home or 6 games at home, and we've got one more game left, and we've had, you know, whatever 100 fans here with family, and then the other team gets a few tickets or whatever. So it's been pretty quiet, but I think our guys have gotten used to it, and typically we'd like to use the home ice momentum, but sometimes that could help on the road too. We think it's helped in our favor on the road, where we've given up a goal, and typically in that building things get crazy, and all of a sudden you've given up 3 goals in a blink of an eye, and you're out of the game. Where with no fans, there's no momentum there. There's no crazy fans, you know, so the momentum stops. So it's just what we've gotten used to, and hopefully it's not for long. I think Chuck mentioned this. Hopefully we're back to normal here. We're back in front of fans starting next fall for us.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to be in North Dakota without any bodies in the arena, right?
They're going to find a way to have fans there. I'll guarantee you that.
Exactly. Hollie, obviously during the summertime with your kids and your training and how you develop their base and everything that swimming is kind of based off of, how did this year kind of affect you? Because I know we were scrambling for pools and outdoor pools and this, that, and everything else. And like I said, I always cringe when you guys do a lot of dry land anyway. I like you guys in the water more than on the ground. But how did that affect you guys? Sorry.
Yeah, you definitely don't like us doing anything on land. You know as well as I do, Doc, that it was quite the struggle, and to go down that rabbit hole, it was tough. I mean, we are definitely water people, and being an endurance sport in the water is really tough to replicate that outside of the water. But we did have athletes that took advantage of the weight room. So we had athletes that really put on a lot of good lean muscle in the weight room when gyms started to open up, or even their at-home gyms. That's where a lot of our athletes were able to get some major gains in a lot of areas, especially with lean muscle masses, to work out in their home gyms when they were at home over the summer. Typically in the summer, we have a pretty healthy group of athletes here training, and we'll go to various meets around the state, around the country, and we didn't have that this summer. So we were doing a lot of communicating back and forth with athletes of how they can replicate the endurance side of our sport. We did have athletes that would not only run, for those that were able to do it, but get on treadmills to run, get on bikes, get on elliptical machines, some things that can start to replicate that. So it was very difficult. I think a lot of our athletes did a really good job of maintaining their core strength, but it was definitely a reintegration back into the water when we were finally back in this facility when we opened back up in October.
Good. I've always been a person that obviously I like live conversation. I don't necessarily like text messages. I don't necessarily like email. And you guys have a very large team how have you been with not being able to get all of them together and jump around and huddle around and everything else? How have you worked that communication with your team this year and still kind of maintained the camaraderie that you have with a large men and women's swim team? Hollie.
Well, I think a lot of yeah, of course. A lot of this has to be attributed to our leadership on the team, our captains, who did a really good job of staying in touch, not only through our group chats, but with virtual meetings. I can tell you over the summer and into the fall, I would have weekly meetings with our team as well as the parents. The parents would have a separate meeting, which is something I would not typically do, but I felt it was absolutely necessary. And it became very impactful when our team was put in quarantine when we first got back. So to communicate with not only the parents, but to have them disseminate the information that I'm giving them back to their 18 to 22-year-olds who are questioning why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Now they're hearing it from both sides. So, it's really trying to recruit as many people to help, as I said, disseminate the information appropriately, because the worst thing that could happen is, a typical phone tree, when I say something and it gets translated in a different way, then all of a sudden we have even more questions. So I think that was very, very impactful over the summer and into the fall to be able to get the information out quickly and to get it out correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, we all loved that mass quarantine. That was fun. Chuck, with just how when we were sitting down in the end of March, April, May, and we were kind of figuring out what the heck we were going to do. We had weight rooms that weren't open. We could basically have no more than 10 people. Kind of go through a little bit on your thinking and how we did the disc and how we changed the APC and how we had to think out of the box to get our kids in there and start lifting a little bit.
Yeah, no, obviously we knew we were going to probably be the first team back because, our season was going to be first and our training in the summer is different and our schedule is different than some of the other sports. And And then we knew it wasn't going to be normal. We had no idea when they were going to let us back. But then it was, I know me and you talking, Doc, was like our goal was we were going to have to do some convincing that we could do this safely, because I was back at the beginning when everybody was, obviously over the top crazy on all this stuff. So then we knew the restrictions. They're going to tell us you could only have so many people working out with masks so far apart. And then you start looking at our weight room facilities, and we've got awesome weight room facilities at Miami. But when you start looking at COVID restrictions, you're going to train 100 football players 8 or 9 at a time. You're talking about, 16 hours of training a day, which obviously now you can't do it. It's not even, hey, we're going to grind through this. So I remember we met, me, you, and a couple other people. We were trying to figure out how to do it. I remember standing in the disc and looking at the disc, and the disc is obviously our indoor football facility. And then you bringing up the fact that, anything we do in the disc is safer than the weight room, because the disc, when they made it, they flow outside air through the disc. The disc you're not just breathing your own air. There's actually air leaving the disc and fresh air being blown into the disc. And then you're thinking 6 feet apart. Well, you look at any weight room, if you've ever been in a weight room from junior high, high school, college, NFL, like people are not 6 inches apart. That's just not how it is. And that's awesome during normal times. And you're on top of each other, and there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm, which we do still miss. So I remember we came up with the idea in that meeting, just bouncing ideas off each other of, could we turn the disc into a weight room? Could we take our weights, spread them out more than 6 feet apart, because they are our racks now, as opposed to our racks being 2 inches apart, our racks are over 5 yards apart. And could we create multiple weight rooms within the disc, which then would allow us to train? If we could only have 8 people in a weight room, could we create 3 weight rooms with all the space we had? Thank God for the disc. Thank God for, if anybody's on this call that has donated to Miami Athletics or to the disc, you kind of saved all our seasons, to be honest with you. So we actually we turned the disc into 3 different weight rooms. It was socially distanced. Doc Dailey was okay with it, because all his restrictions, we were meeting all the restrictions that was going to make it safe. We lifted with masks. We took it one step further. We made sure, we used to lift by positions. Every sport has their way of doing their conditioning. You lift by position. Well, that went out the window. We were lifting with your roommates. So if you lived in the dorm with somebody, that's who you're going to be in the rack with. If you lived in a house with somebody, that's who you're. So we were going to the nth degree to make it as like, hey, the kids are already living in a dorm room. It's probably safe for them to live in the rack, because if one of them gets it in the dorm, they sleep in that little box every day. They're probably already gonna be affecting. So we limited the amount of people. We had enough space. And then the interesting thing is, like, that went so well this summer, at least for me, it was awesome. It allowed us to train our team. Was it normal? No, but it allowed us to train our team, like Berge was saying, be appreciative that we're back together training. And again, the kids were sick of being at home. It was like anything we told them when they came back, they were willing to do to get to play their particular sport or train for their particular sport. Well, then we rolled into the season, and now we hadn't used the locker room all summer. That was off limits. We still haven't used the showers in the locker room. To this day, we haven't taken a shower since pre-quarantine in our facility.
We probably should turn those pipes on.
Yeah. Let's let them thaw out first before we turn on. I tried that once in my house. It didn't work so good. So flood the basement in a hurry. So then what we did is me and Doc got together, and we literally moved 2/3 of our players' lockers out of the locker room. So 1/3 of our kids could socially distance and use our locker room to dress for the season. And then 2/3 actually in the back section of the disc where the long jump and the pole vault is, we put up curtains, and we created individual lockers 6 feet apart, so we'd have a place to dress. Because summer conditioning was one thing. They just dressed at home. It was like junior high. Show up and grab your stuff out of the back of your car and let's go. Well, when the season hits and now we got equipment and practice, and then we did the same thing in the training room. We moved half our training room out of the training room. So all we did in the training room was treatment, which allowed them to be functioning in the training room, because you can only have so many people in there. And now we have other sports back and people are using our training room, and we moved our training room. So our disc, in the fall, we practiced in the disc. There was 24 racks in the disc. there was 60 some lockers in the disc, and there was half our training room in the disc all at one time. And in the space we have that, David, we didn't have that when I got here. I can't even imagine. I mean, I don't even know there was a solution without it. But David Saylor getting here 8 years ago and starting to raise money and getting us Division I facilities has been awesome. Has helped me turn my program around, but it's also saved us during COVID. Like the amount of space we had allowed us. And then even in the meeting rooms upstairs in our building, you just can't pack kids in the meeting room. That's where a lot of my competitors got zapped. A linebacker would get COVID and everybody in their meeting room would get contact trace and be knocked out. Well, we had enough space in our meeting rooms that we were meeting 6 feet apart with masks on, and we were in a position that we wouldn't necessarily get contact trace if one kid at one position would zap the whole position. So, like Hollie said, you had to think outside the box. Like you said, Doc, you had to think outside the box. But our facilities and our space allowed us, and we still have racks in the weight room, and we're still using it so we can train more guys because we're still, it's a little normal for me but there's still protocols we're following. And this is allowing us to train 100 football players. But the beautiful thing is I go in there at 7 a.m. and women's soccer's in there, and baseball's in there and softball's in there and track and field's in there and football's in there. And a lot of them are still using the weight room, not just football. So it was a great decision. We didn't know. I remember sitting in there in July, like, what the hell are we going to do? Like, anybody got an answer? 8 people at a time? Like,
Right.
That's not working, but then over the course of time, it's turned out to be really good and really been beneficial for our student athletes.
Yeah, we got a lot of looks too when we told them we wanted to move all the weights outside into the discs. Kind of people didn't want to, can move all the weights. That was a lot of work. And the strength and conditioning staff, those guys did a great job moving everything else down to where we did. Our athletic training staff has been doing a great job. And the coach has been doing a great job. And I do want to talk too. The students have actually been doing an awesome job with this. Chuck brought it up. You go to a point in time that you're almost afraid to test positive for COVID because you're afraid that you're going to be blamed for something. So our kids, instead of having a big scarlet letter on their chest, they got a big scarlet C on the chest. And you can do the best you possibly can, and you're still going to test positive sometimes. I mean, like I said, there's been 50 million, however many million people across the country that tested positive. And that's put, we have kids that we have high academic standards at Miami University. We have high athletic standards at Miami University. And we put this on top of them, going in and getting tested. We have, the hockey team is testing multiple times a week. The swimming team is testing multiple times a week. The football team is testing multiple times a week. We had a period of time where the women's basketball team tested 16 days in a row because we were trying to play a couple Big Ten schools. And I don't necessarily know if anybody's ever had to take that test on a regular basis. All of us had. It's kind of stressful, because you go in there, you're kind of keeping your fingers crossed. Am I going to test positive? Am I going to test negative? You walk out a big sigh of relief and go. And then you have to do the same damn thing. Pardon my French. Same thing, 48 hours later and kind of go with that. So our kids have done an amazing job with this. Coach, at the beginning of during the 2020 season, we had the Miami announced the creation of the Football Champion Fund. And I know that there's been some enthusiasm about that champion fund. How is it affected? How is it potentially impact? And how is it going to impact us in the future, hopefully?
Yeah, well, obviously, university is a company, Miami football is a company, Miami athletics is a company, and with companies, there's budgets. And obviously, a lot of companies have taken hits because of COVID and have their margins have been hit very hard, and a lot of companies have closed, and a lot of companies are about to close. So the Champions Fund, obviously, we started it this fall. We didn't we had a Miami alum that was going to match the first $50,000 that was donated, which is incredible. Our Miami alums, as always, coming through. And so we were off to a great start. We didn't immediately take that money and start using it because we knew there was trying times ahead. There's a lot of things that are getting taken away at a lot of companies, and we're no different. You have cost of attendance, which will, This year, the university covered cost of attendance, which was wonderful that, Dr. Crawford did that, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the play moving forward. And in not all sports, but in my sports, that's part of the recruiting is if some school's going to give you cost of attendance and you're not, you may lose some good recruits. There's the issue of summer school. That costs a lot of money, and having kids in the summer, we have to have our kids in the summer. You can't have a football season in the fall and they show up on August 1st not trained. You have to train them during the summer to prepare for the fall. Well, that's a big financial burden. J-term, like I said, this year we bit the bullet with J-term. We didn't have a bowl game to go to, and our kids went home for 6 weeks. Well, that's disastrous. You can't send your kids home for 6 weeks. They can't not train for 6 weeks. So there's going to be a lot of costs down the road that maybe, everybody's making cuts everywhere, and we're no different, that there's going to be cuts made to the athletic budget, and it's going to be divvied up among all the sports, and we're all already feeling it as head coaches already, but it's not going away. It's not like once, if next year is a little more normal for us as far as practice and playing, it's not going to be more normal for us budgetary. Right. We already know that. So we're gonna have to continue to raise money outside just to do the things you'd like to improve and keep building your program, but we're gonna have to continue to raise money from outside sources in athletics just to do what we've done in the past, and that's going to be for the next, I don't know how many years, but for the next few years. So that fund and any fundraising any sports program is doing is going to be super critical. And then you add in the MAC, and I know Berge is in a different league, but we're at the bottom of the food chain already as far as budgets go in Division I. So when they talk about, well, everybody's cutting, not everybody's cutting in Division I football. Not everybody's cutting. There's some staffs that got big raises this year. So when I hear everybody's cutting, you mean everybody's cutting in the MAC. I get it. Everybody's cutting in the MAC, but we're trying to be competitive outside the MAC also. And when you're already at the bottom of the budgetary, and some of the schools you play, particularly non-league, have 3, 4, 5 times your budget to start off with all year round, and then we're going to cut our budget, it's putting you in a position where you're worried about even staying Division I in athletics. I mean, it is a concern of mine how far behind can you get up behind other Division I programs and still say you're Division I and still say you're going to be competitive. So any fundraising, particularly at Champions Fund, we're gonna use it to try to keep up with where we've grown to, which has been a great place. But we don't want to take giant steps backwards, and we did for 1 year, but we don't want to continue to do that for the next 3, 4, 5 years, because that will end really bad for MAC sports. It really will. It'll end the MAC.
It looks like we've got just a couple more minutes. Hollie, do you have any last words or any thoughts of wisdom that you want to let everybody know?
Well, we only have a couple minutes, Doc.
Well,
no.
That's why I'm not talking.
I do want to touch on one thing because it's very near and dear to my heart. There was a question I know we got ahead of time about basically with all the negativity of the pandemic, what is something positive that we can take from it? I can be perfectly honest, and especially with these other two that are on the call, the relationships I've formed within our department and around the country with other colleagues has been life-changing. The fact that I have Chuck Martin and Chris Bergeron's cell phone numbers, and I can call them anytime, and they pick up the phone and talk to me, has just been an enormous impact in such a positive way, because they're such role models and leaders that I feel like we've been able to get closer and share ideas and be able to come together, not only in our department as a coaching staff, but especially around the country with other colleagues that we're affiliated with. So that is definitely one fantastic positive that I just wanted to share with everyone.
Sounds good. Berge, you have any last thoughts?
I noticed you didn't use the word wisdom when you said Berge. Wisdom and Berge don't go together. No, I don't. I'm extremely proud of the student athletes. I'm going to say in general, I'm a Miami guy. I'm a Miami alum. I'm proud of that. This has been difficult times, and I'm proud of these kids to. And I echo what Chuck said. It's COVID-19's fault. That's it. And these kids have done great. If we're going to blame anything, we're blaming COVID. And Hollie, thank you for saying that, because that goes both ways. I'm the new guy around here, and I wish I could have stronger relationships with the other coaches, but we have had some very real conversations one-on-one and in our group. And I think there's been benefit there for me. So thank you for saying that.
Sounds good. I just want to thank everybody who's got on here. I want to thank the three of you guys. You guys made this pretty easy for me. I didn't, like I said, this is the first time moderating. Chuck told me about this the other night, and I'm thinking, holy crap, what the heck am I going to do this? I do want to just kind of thank all the coaches. I want to thank all the support staff, the strength and conditioning staff, the athletic training staff, and more importantly, just kind of once again, just kind of thank our student athletes, because our kids showed their mettle in this whole situation. So it's good. So I think that's kind of a wrap. Sarah.
Thanks, Doug.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation, and thank you, Dr. Dailey, and each of our coaches for joining us today. I just want to let everyone know that the next session that we have coming up for Winter College is Secrets of Gen-Intelligence Teams, and that will be with Dr. Megan Gerhardt, and it starts here soon at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. There are unique URLs for each of these sessions that we're holding today. So if you refer to your registration confirmation email for the link for each presentation by clicking on Events by Type on the website's top toolbar and then selecting Winter College 2021 from the drop-down menu. On behalf of the Miami University Alumni Association, thank you so much for joining us. Love and honor.